Hi guys, welcome to our daily encounter. In Psalm 142, David mentions that his soul had been imprisoned. In verse 7, it says, "Bring my soul out of prison so that I may give thanks to your name." This is a very difficult thing to deal with in life. You know, it would be bad enough to be physically in prison, uh, to be basically cut off from all of your relatives and friends and whatnot, and to be actually placed in a cell where you aren't able to get out when you're trapped. But I would suggest that perhaps some of the most difficult prisons that a person can encounter is that of the soul. When the soul is in prison, that's when life becomes very perplexing. And clearly, David is experiencing that here. Oftentimes, our soul does become imprisoned. It becomes imprisoned because of sorrow, because of depression, because of fear, or maybe because of anxiety. And we just feel trapped on the inside, and we don't feel like we can break out and go back to the way that we used to be. And we just become imprisoned. That's the best description for it. We just feel like there is no escape for our souls. And here the psalmist has several reasons why he felt like his soul was in prison. He had mentioned that he was experiencing trouble. In verse 2, he says, "I declare my trouble before him," talking about God. He had people who were setting traps before him. In verse 3, it says, "They have hidden a trap for me." And then he says, "No one cared." In verse 4, "Look to the right and see. There is none or no one who regards me. There is no escape for me. No one cares for my soul." And then his soul was in prison because there was no escape. As we just read in verse 4, he says, "There is no escape for me." And that was in connection to the fact that no one cared. And so here you have the psalmist dealing with some very difficult things in life. He was dealing with you could just generally say he was dealing with trouble. And anytime trouble enters into our lives, it has the capacity to imprison our soul, especially if we're really focused on the trouble. If it's something that is really taking over our minds and our hearts, it can really imprison our soul. But it becomes even worse when the trouble is stirred up by other people, and people are setting traps for us or persecuting us or just slandering us and trying to get us to trip up so that they have reason to speak out against us. That's when the soul can really become imprisoned. That's not just troubles that come randomly, as life oftentimes just brings trouble into our lives, but this is trouble that was intentionally caused by others, which makes it all the more worse. And then the feeling that no one cares. That can be very, very difficult. It's one thing to experience trouble. It's a whole nother level when that trouble is intentionally caused by others. And then it gets even more difficult if we feel like nobody even cares about what we're going through. And that can really lead us into a path of despondency and loneliness and separation from others. And it can really get pretty bleak, and our soul even becomes more and more imprisoned. And then to feel like there's no escape. To feel like there is no way to get out of it, humanly speaking, knowing that no one's going to help you, no one cares, people are actually out to get you instead of trying to help you. That can even plummet us all the more into the darkness. So this was a very bleak situation for David, feeling troubled, people laying traps for him being or not having anyone care for him, and feeling like there was no escape. So what did he do in that situation? How was it that he was able to process this imprisonment of his soul? Well, he went to the Lord. In verse 1, "I cry aloud with my voice to the Lord. I make supplication with my voice to the Lord. I pour out my complaint before him. I declare my trouble before him." He went to the Lord in response to this feeling that he was having of his soul being imprisoned. And this was because he had confidence in God. In verse 7, He says, bring my soul out of prison so that I may give thanks to your name. The righteous will surround me, for you will deal bountifully with me. He had hope that even though no one else cared, even other people were laying traps for him, even though humanly speaking there was no escape, in God he had his confidence. In God he could look up and say, the Lord will deal bountifully with me in this situation. The Lord will allow my soul to break out of prison once again when I see how he deals in this situation, deals with me in this situation. So let's have the confidence that David had when we feel that our soul is in prison, when we feel like there's trouble in our life, maybe even when we experience it at the hand of others, when we feel as though no one even cares about what we're going through, when we feel like there's no escape, just turn to the Lord and cry out to the Lord as David did and find confidence in the Lord and see our souls break out of that prison cell and be freed again to worship and love the Lord with a devoted heart. So here's some things we can reflect on and think about as we do our reading today. With that, guys, I do thank you for watching the video today. Hope you guys have a great day. Love you guys. God bless.